sitter du Baku? Om jag bara först också kommer upp på Dallutra.
Bir. O. Kép. O.
not to lose your time and to be in time at the opening.
But we need Joe is coming. Where should we put him, actually? Ah, he's in Ikram's place, okay.
Yeah, we have not enough chairs for the secretary.
Просто бумажки тоже взял.
Все это оставь здесь.
Он что-то хочет экран видеть, что ли, или что?
Экран.
Я как думаю.
Display.
Алло.
Here, okay, I have one part of it. I can.
Центр 70, типа 60.
I guess one was for the text, and the other one was a large.
Ну, я дала, ну, это я не могу.
You know, the widest I can go is this. And for me, the multiple.
Они сами сказали, 70, нет, вчера, да, вчера же 75 было, помнишь, мы? Что мы взяли?
Okay, don't worry for now, but.
Onların narahat ediyor gözlerimi. Ben neyim? Kamera değil, yaktırdı ben onların gözler için. Pis değil. Aşağı sen tam görüyoruz. Şimdi center хотя вчера был.
Birine bir şey ver, birine de bir şey ver.
Так они не Iraklardan da ışıklarını yansıtsınlar, olsunlar. Вот скажут, сейчас видите, что они, зачем они getirecek doları. Они же поставили баланс вместе со своим светом давали свет. Diren ki ben de 100 verende onların gözlerine vurur. İstemirler onlar. Yetmiş ki. Normalde değil.
Second display.
VIP ofisin tuvaletlerine bir daha kızlar gelsinler başkaları bir kutu var ama.
Distinguished members of the World Heritage Committee, dear Director Rossler, members of the Secretariat and the advisory bodies, ICOMOS, IUCN, and ICROM. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome you at the orientation session. Dear colleagues, as you know, this is the second orientation session like that for committee members which we held this year. As you will remember, we have already held one session last May in UNESCO headquarters. These meetings allow more opportunities for exchanges and more time for preparation of the session which will start tomorrow. As you know, orientation sessions are notably dedicated to the committee members and jointly prepared by the World Heritage Center and the 3 advisory bodies. Their aim is to assist the committee members in the preparation of the committee meeting in the best possible conditions. They contribute to objective decisions by committee members and help to familiarize themselves with the relevant procedures, notions, and topics related to the World Heritage. Hence, these orientation sessions are very helpful to help reaching the most appropriate solutions concerning the issues that we will have to address during the next 10 days. Dear colleagues, I have now some other commitments and leave you in the hands of the director of the World Heritage Center and Mr. King from the Quorum, who will guide you through the session. Today we have the opening not as it was written in the schedule, but it will start at 8 o'clock. So please, we would be happy to welcome you at the building next door to this one, to Haydar Aliyev Foundation building, at 7:30 the latest, to proceed to the hall before 8. At 8, we will start our opening ceremony. The opening ceremony will be held until approximately 9:20, 9:25, with the speeches, opening speeches, and cultural program. After that, we will have immediate reception, which will be arranged in the same building, in the another hall, which is under one cover, under one roof. So, for those who will be a little bit late, the access to the hall where the opening ceremony will start will be closed after 8 o'clock. But those who will be late can get acquainted. They will have free access to the museums and exhibitions situated in the same building and wait for the reception, which will start somewhere 9:20, 9:30. So we are waiting for you there, and I hope that you will enjoy the evening, which will give start to our common work for the next 10 days. Now, if you permit me, because I'm the chair of the organizing committee on the State Part 2, so to go to check the preparation for the opening ceremony and the reception, to welcome you at most appropriate way to make the hospitality as much as possible. So now I'm giving the floor to Mrs. Rossler and Mr. King, who will proceed the orientation session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for this introduction, and we fully understand that you are busy with the organizing committee. Dear members of the committee and all observers here in the room, dear advisory bodies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to join the chairperson in thanking you all to come to this session, as well, especially as we have a number of committee members which have decided to come with enlarged delegations. I think these meetings are really useful. We had one on the 29th of May, and they help us to better prepare and share some views, approaches, and general discussions prior to the actual session of the World Heritage Committee. I think this one is especially important to inform you on the details of the session starting tomorrow, some of the procedures and processes you will be faced with during this session, and actually testing the room. The chairperson, the bureau just said this is a rehearsal to a certain extent. This is actually a rehearsal. And I have a plea to you. Please inform us of anything we could improve to ensure the functioning of the room and to assist you, especially the committee members, throughout the session. So this is also a testing phase for our equipment. So please give us feedback if there's any issue. With this, I would like to turn over to Mr. King from Quorum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Rossler. I appreciate that very much, and thank you, members of the World Heritage Committee, for being here for this orientation session. As you know, we carry out the orientation sessions every year, both in Paris and immediately prior to the session of the committee. I think the point of these, many of you are already have quite a bit of expertise on World Heritage matters, but I think the idea here is to make sure that all the members of the delegations, whether they're coming from Paris or whether they're coming from your capitals or maybe even from some of your sites, have at least the basic background information necessary about World Heritage. both in terms of the content and the procedural matters. As has already been mentioned to you by the director of the World Heritage Center, the particular session here before the beginning of the committee session will focus more on procedural matters, voting, things like that, which will hopefully be very useful to you in terms of the proceeding through with your business over the course of the next 10 days. But in addition to that, we will go back through and have a brief reminder on the issues such as outstanding universal value and the nomination process and the state of conservation process. So, having said that, at this point, I would like to move straight into the agenda. I know we don't have actually that much time today. And so at this point, I would like to give the floor back to the director of the World Heritage Center, who will give us an introduction on the venue and on the agenda and the timetable for the meeting that we are about to take part in. I give the floor back to the director of the center.
Thank you very much, Joe, for this introduction. Concerning the venue, you are actually in the committee venue, so which is the plenary session, and in front on the other side you have the bureau meeting, where we'll have the bureau sessions every morning starting at 9:30 from Tuesday onwards, because we just come from a bureau session, so we are not doing a bureau session tomorrow morning. On the podium you see not only the chairperson and the director of the center as secretariat, but you see also our ADG Culture who joined us here, our deputy director, the secretariat and the advisory bodies, and on the other side our rapporteur and our legal advisor. So this will be the same also throughout the session. Now, next slide please. We will have all the documents available on our webpage, but most importantly, there are two documents which are absolutely critical for the work of this committee. Of course, the convention itself, which you find on our webpage, as well as the operational guidelines, which is the 2017 version, and the rules of procedure, which is the 2015 version, which you also have online. But we have a certain amount of our books which contain actually all these documents in one document. Next slide, please. This is really the basic text I have just shown. You have this fully online, and this is a working document for the World Heritage Committee at every session. This is very critical, especially for the processes which we come to later here. The two big items, state of conservation and the nominations as well. Next slide, please. As you know, we try to be environmentally friendly, and we are greening UNESCO. So since 2012, we have introduced into all the World Heritage Committee sessions electronic documents. So you have the documents on USB stick for your use, and everything is fully online on this tab you see here on the screen, which is the tab of the 43rd session, where you have the documents and actually also the nominations fully online. Now, here in the next slide, please. Here is again the information on the rooms. So the bureau session every morning, room A7. The Bureau, as you all know, prepares the agenda of the World Heritage Committee, so this is a very important meeting every morning. If we are running late, the Bureau will take certain decisions and proposals towards the World Heritage Committee to streamline potentially the discussions and to look at the agenda for the next few days, so to make adjustments, and the chair will inform you in the morning about the debates of the Bureau. Now then you have the plenary session every day from 10 to 1 o'clock in this room. Then the budget working group, and as you have just heard in the Bureau session, the budget group will start on Tuesday the 2nd, run until the 4th July, exactly in the same room as the Bureau, which is the A7. And the same is true for the operational guidelines working group, which meets also in A7, but after the Bureau. So there are no parallel working groups. We start with the budget, and then we continue in the same room after the 5th of July with the Operational Guidelines Working Group. And then again afterwards, we have from 3 to 6 in the plenary session here. You all remember that there was a decision in the past that we shouldn't have night sessions, so we try not to have night sessions to comply with this decision of the World Heritage Committee. Next one, the key documents for you are these documents, which is 3A, which is the agenda, then the timetable 3B, which actually I always put in front of me that we can see where we are, and then the list of documents, which is in 3A ref.4, and there will be 3A ref.5, because we are forced to further revise the list of documents with a number of new documents which have to be prepared. Now I will present a slide which is extremely important for all the delegations. If you move to the next slide, please. This is the order of the discussions of state of conservation and the order of the discussion of nominations. We start this year with natural sites, go to the mixed, and then to the cultural. In terms of the presentations of state of conservation, we start with the Arab region, then Asian Pacific, Europe and North America, Latin America and the Caribbean, and then the African region. And then for the nominations, again, we start with natural, we go to mixed, and then to cultural sites, and then we go from the African region to the Arab states, Asia Pacific, Europe and North America, and then Latin America. I think this slide is one of the most important for the committee members, because then you know exactly in which order the discussion will take place for these two major items. Next slide, please. Every day we have, of course, the lunch break, and in the evening from 6 to 9, you have a number of side events. The side events take place at level 2, but there are also exhibitions at different levels, the main lobby level 2 and the balconies level 3. I know it's a complex building, but I hope you find your way around. There are also indications. Next slide, please. As I just mentioned at the Bureau meeting, we have now 50 side events and exhibitions, and the daily schedule is announced on the screens. We also have them on the webpage, and we will also announce it at each of the plenary sessions. Next slide, please. As I discussed with you just now, we have working groups. Next slide, one is the budget working group. Those groups will be established on Monday morning. So if you see in your timetable Monday morning item 14, that means we establish the budget group and elect the chair. And the item remains open until we close it before the end of the session. And the same is true for the Operational Guidelines Group. We establish the Operational Guidelines Group, next slide please, which meets at lunchtime. Oh, sorry, I was too fast. Here is again the schedule for the budget group from 2 to 4th of July, from 2 to 3 p.m. in the A7 room, which is just across. So when you finish the budget group, you just walk over into the plenary session. Next slide, please. So the other group is the Operational Guidelines Working Group, which has a number of key issues of changes, revisions to the operational guidelines. Next slide, please. And that group meets from 5th July to Monday, 8th July from 2 to 3, again in room A7, which is next door, after which you can come back into the plenary session. So this is my presentation of some of the key matters relevant, especially to the committee members in relation to the organization of our session. And Mr. Joe King, I think we turn over to Mrs. Tocharova on procedural matters.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Rossler. Yes, that is correct. We will now move and give the floor to Petya Tocharova to talk about the procedural matters on the conduct of the committee session. Petya?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to cover in this presentation the main questions, the main issues that are often raised in regard to conducting of a committee session. Questions concerning the functioning, the roles of the chair and the rapporteur, the voting, and other related issues. Where can you find the rules of procedure? They're available on our website, both in English and French, and they are available also, they have been included in the basic texts of the convention, which include the convention itself, the operational guidelines, the rules of procedure of the General Assembly and the committee. The page where you can find them is 25. Of course, we are not going to look into detail in all of the regulations, all of the rules of the rules of procedure, but a couple of really main elements. I'll start with the role of the chairperson, which is defined by Rule 14, 14.1, 2, 3, and as you know, the chair he exercises the powers that are conferred upon him by the rules. He opens and closes each plenary meeting, directs discussions, ensures observance of the rules, accords the right to speak, puts questions to the vote and announces decisions. He rules on points of order and controls, subject to the rules, the proceedings and the maintenance of order. He shall not vote, but he may instruct another member of his delegation to vote on his behalf. You know that it sometimes may happen that the chairperson is not in a position to exercise his function in this case, as we have seen it also in this session. It may so happen. Then his functions shall be exercised by a vice chairperson in the English alphabetical order of states members of the Bureau, commencing with the country of the chairperson. In a way, we have had, for those that have attended the Bureau meeting, we have already seen how this works, because the chairperson was retained by another important event. So the country in the alphabetical order in English language that comes after the host country, the chairperson's country, actually took his role and was and chaired the Bureau meeting. The role of the rapporteur is also described in Rule 14.4. Basically, the rapporteur, in addition to any other powers conferred upon him by the rules, the rapporteur shall certify that the Secretariat has accurately recorded the committee's decisions and shall work with the Secretariat to monitor and record committee debate on amendments. And that's one very, very important task, as you'll see later on. Jumping into another matter, speaking order and time limits. These are questions that are often asked. What is the speaking order? Committee members, advisory bodies, you have it on the screen, followed by states, parties, observers, and other observers, NGO and other observers. Within these categories, the chairperson shall call upon speakers in the order in which they signify their wish to speak. And there is an important Rule 22.6 that states parties shall not speak about World Heritage properties in their territories, except at the explicit invitation of the chair within the allowed time, and in response to a specific question that's posed. In this regard, there is another rule that needs to be highlighted, and that's 22.7, also concerning taking the floor. The representatives, and it concerns basically nominations and evaluations of sites proposed for inscription, representatives of states parties, whether or not members of the committee, may be invited by the chair to present their views after the advisory bodies have presented their evaluation of the site proposed for inscription. And it's very important that this presentation should be limited to a clarification or an update In no case, and here that's not precisely the text, but what it means in no case should it be an advocacy for the inscription of the site or any other promotion of this type. It should be limited to a clarification or an update on the proposed site. After that, no more the floor can be taken by the said state party, except where the state party is invited to reply to specific question. As long as we are in the speaking order and time limits and so on, what is the time limit? That has been mentioned previously. It's worth recalling that. Time limit 3 minutes for committee members, 2 minutes for observers, and also 2 minutes for every next intervention of a committee member if they're taking the floor for a second and third time. This is operated by a timer and a sound, and yeah, you'll see it. You'll see how it works. We'll experience how it works tomorrow. And the chairperson, he has already indicated that he'll be very strict with the time limit for the interventions. The quorum. What is the quorum? We can find the respective rule. It's 17.1. The majority of states parties, states members of the committee shall constitute the quorum. Point of order is something else about which we often receive questions. During a discussion, any state member may raise a point of order. Such point of order shall be immediately decided upon by the chairperson. That means whatever discussion is in the process is kind of stopped and a decision is taken by the chair on the point of order that has been raised. That concerns the actual functioning of the committee, of course, and there are specific rules which are related to the functioning in a larger sense, and this is the creation of consultative and subsidiary bodies. You see the text of the respective rule about consultative bodies, Rule 20 on the screen. I'm not going to read the text. I'll just recall that we have two consultative groups which typically are being established like the Standing Committee on Standing Working Group on Budget and the group on the operational guidelines, which were already explained by Ms. Rossler. It's important to note that those groups are composed not only of committee members, but also they can include states parties, non-members of the committee. Many of you have already experienced how these groups work and function, and the budget group will start its work after it's constituted tomorrow on Tuesday. There is also Rule 21, which concerns subsidiary bodies, and at this point of time, you can see the text. The difference, of course, there is a difference with the consultative bodies. As far as subsidiary bodies are concerned, only committee members can be included in the composition of subsidiary bodies. We are coming to next slide, please. We are coming to a question which is very, I suppose, of interest for all the committee members, delegations, the question of amendments. And this has already been explained from a more practical perspective. The relevant rule is 23. 23.1, 23.2, 23.3. It's, again, very important to highlight, look at 23.3, that new draft decisions or proposals and amendments thereto should be submitted to the Secretariat at least 24 hours before the discussion, whenever possible, says the text. and whenever possible means that it can happen also after the 24 hours. For those that attended the Bureau session, they would remember that the chairperson insisted on the utility of having those amendments submitted well in advance so that both the Secretariat, advisory bodies, states parties, committee members can be aware of what's proposed, can review and can participate in the debate in order to reach informed decisions. So the 24 hours is a very, very important time consideration. From a more practical perspective, we have the slide with the blue paper. All of you know the blue papers, and this is a very, how they say, an old tradition in the World Heritage Committee that amendments are presented by committee members on the blue form. This form will be sent to you by email from the Secretariat to all committee members, because only committee members can submit amendments, and the amendments should be submitted preferably by email to the rapporteur, one form per amendment. And for those that can submit those in the two languages, the two working languages of the committee, we would be very grateful. And looking here at the rapporteur next to me, all of us will be very grateful. If not, we'll organize translation in due time, but of course you cannot expect that to be immediate. In case of multiple amendments on the same draft decision, they will be distributed on blue paper. There will be hard copies for the podium, for the committee members. Since last year, since the 42nd session in Manama, we have introduced a new, how they say, a new practice, distributing the amendments also online. They uploaded on the website so that the committee members and other stakeholders are facilitated in having the information as soon as possible. And of course, it's a very green initiative. I suppose you'd all agree with me on that. Voting procedure. Voting procedure, you can consult the detailed rules, starting from Rule 35, voting rights. It's probably not needed to recall that each state member of the committee shall have one vote in the committee, but as long as we are there, let's mention it. There is also a very important rule about the conduct during voting. After the chairperson, and this is, we have had discussions about it, and often this question comes up, but the rules are very clear on this. After the chairperson has announced the beginning of voting, no one shall interrupt the voting except on a point of order in connection with the actual conduct of the voting. This is a rule which I believe is very clearly formulated. Now, the majority is of importance, and it's defined in rules 37 and 38. The 2/3 majority is required for decisions of the committee on matters covered by the provisions of the convention. In these cases, it's a 2/3 majority of members present and voting. A simple majority for all other matters, except where otherwise specified in the rules of procedure, which is exactly the 37 qualified majority, 2/3 majority. All other decisions of the committee shall be taken by a majority of the states present and voting. So we have two types of majority, one for the matters covered by the provisions of the Convention and one for any other matters. In the Rule 38.2 concerns decisions as to whether particular matter is covered by the provisions of the conventions and this of the convention. This is taken by a majority of the states members present and voting. That is, if there is a kind of no clarity as to whether a certain matter is covered by the provisions or not, there will be first voting on this matter, and for this case, we have a simple majority. Rule 39 deals with the counting of votes. It is important to note that state members that abstain from voting shall be regarded as not voting. So it's good for you to remember this when you take your decision whether to vote yes, no, or whether to abstain. In the case you abstain, that will be non-voting. Voting, how would you vote if you have to vote? Normally by a show of hands. When the result of such a vote is in doubt, there might be a second vote decided by the chair by a roll call. And such a roll call voting can also be taken if requested by not less than 2 states members before the voting takes place. Secret ballot, that's another option. That is show of hands, roll call, secret ballot. Decision shall be voted by secret ballot whenever 2 or more states members shall so request, or if the chair so decides. So, 2 hypotheses, one asked by a certain committee member, seconded by a second one, or if the chair so decides. And the conduct of voting by secret ballot is outlined in Rule 42. We're not going to go into details now, and that can very well be explained if there would be such a case. Hopefully, all decisions will be taken by consensus, and there would be no need for voting. But in case we have voting, there would be more explanations about the specific applicable rules. And about the majorities at the end, let's go to the last but one slide. These are just 2 examples on simple majority. If you have 20 votes recorded and 11 required for the proposal to pass, that's the simple majority. That is, you have 20 votes, so you need 10 plus 1 for the proposal to pass. This is, that's the majority needed. And last slide, the 2/3 majority, that is for the cases covered by the convention. If you have 20 votes recorded, 14 votes will be required for the vote to pass. This is the calculations, because you need 2/3 of 20 is equal to 33, so it's 14 votes are actually needed for the majority of 2/3. Well, I think I have covered most of the elements which concern procedure, taking the floor, voting, and so on. And of course, if there is a need at any moment of time, we can provide further information about the applicable rules. Legal Affairs will be with us during the whole duration of the session for any legal matters, for the interpretation of any of the rules. They would be available to answer your questions and introduce the necessary clarifications before any where their advice is sought. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That's all about procedures for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Petya. And actually Mechthild, who's gone away for a second. But before we move on to the next set of topics, which is outstanding universal value, the nominations, and the state of conservation, because this first part is dealing specifically with procedure, and there are a series of things that have come out, I want to ask the members of the committee if they have any questions that they would like to ask Petya at this moment, if there are things that are not clear or things that they would seek to have more explanation on in relation to the procedures, the voting, speaking order, things like that. I don't see any questions at the moment. Okay, so in that case, we can move on then. And if you do have any questions, if anything occurs to you, we can still wait to the end of the session to have follow-up questions if you have any. Okay, so the next topic is actually going to be given by me. I'm not giving this floor to anyone for outstanding universal value. That's my topic. Next slide, please. Okay, why do we talk about outstanding universal value? As you know, it is the basis under which this convention operates. And it is something that you, as members of the World Heritage Committee, have to keep in your head at all times in relation to almost any of the decisions that you're going to be making over the course of the next 10 days. And I think it's very much incumbent on us to keep this concept of outstanding universal value in our heads. And that's true for when you are inscribing sites. So when you're inscribing a property on the World Heritage List, you have to, you're voting to put a site on the list, which means that it has outstanding universal value. When you're talking about the state of conservation of a property, you are making recommendations to a state party for how to care for that site within the realm of preserving the outstanding universal value of the property. When we talk about other issues, periodic reporting, et cetera, it always has a basis in this concept of outstanding universal value. And that's why it's important, I think, in the first instance in this orientation session, to just have a quick refresher in our minds as to what really we talk about when we talk about outstanding universal value. Interestingly, in the convention itself, there is no definition of outstanding universal value. It says that a property must have outstanding universal value to be on the World Heritage List, but it does not give a specific definition of that, and it simply says that the committee, it is for the World Heritage Committee to make that determination. For that reason, and for a long time, that was actually the case. But when we revised the operational guidelines in 2005, we actually did add a definition of outstanding universal value, and you see it actually now on the screen. That outstanding universal value means cultural and or natural significance, which is so exceptional as to transcend national boundaries and to be of common importance for present and future generations of all humanity. And as such, the permanent protection of this heritage is of the highest importance to the international community as a whole. And then it again goes on to state that you, the committee, define the criteria under which inscriptions for properties on the World Heritage List are made. So that is the definition now within the operational guidelines of OUV. Next slide, please. The operational guidelines go on further to say that in order for a property to have outstanding universal value, it must meet one or more criteria, but it also must meet conditions of integrity and or authenticity, and it must have protection and management to ensure its safeguarding. Next slide. And I think many of you are familiar with this drawing, actually courtesy of Iucn, and thank you Iucn for this, which I think in a very simple way illustrates this point. In order for a property to have outstanding universal value, it must meet the criteria, but it also must meet the conditions of integrity and authenticity, and it must also meet the conditions that there's adequate protection and adequate management of the property. If it doesn't have one of these three pillars, it doesn't have outstanding universal value. Next slide. And in fact, This is, again, in a simple way, what the drawing is trying to show. It's trying to show that if it doesn't have adequate protection and management in the first instance, it cannot be considered to be of outstanding universal value. And this is really something that I want to highlight again for the members of the committee. Meeting the criteria by themselves are not enough for you to make a determination that a property has outstanding universal value. If it meets the criteria, but it doesn't have authenticity, or it doesn't have adequate integrity, or it doesn't have adequate protection and management, it means that it doesn't have outstanding universal value. And, you know, management can be improved, and so when the management is adequate, then one could say in the future that it has outstanding universal value. But we can't say in the present instance that if it doesn't have the adequate protection and management that it has outstanding universal value. Next slide, please. And why is that? I mean, why are we interested in this protection and management? The reason why is because this convention is actually about the protection of the world's cultural and natural heritage. It's in the name of the convention itself. This convention is not called the World Heritage Convention. As much as we like to think that that's the name of it, it's not. The name of the convention is the Convention Concerning the Protection of the World's Cultural and Natural Heritage. And so the committee over many, many years now has made the determination that if protection is what this convention is about, and it's right there in the title, it means that in addition to meeting criteria, it must also meet these conditions of integrity and authenticity and specifically protection and management. And only at that point in time can we really say that there is outstanding universal value. Next slide, please. And in illustrating this, I've pulled out a site from India to just give you an illustration of sort of how this outstanding universal value shows itself. Next slide, quickly. I'll just go through this this very quickly. The idea of outstanding universal value eventually it becomes embodied in something that, as you all know now, is called the Statement of Outstanding Universal Value. And this Statement of Outstanding Universal Value lays out all of these three things: the criteria, the authenticity and integrity, and the protection and management. And so within this statement, you will start out with paragraphs related specifically to the criteria that are met. In this case, criteria 3. And I'm not going to read this for you, but I just want to point out that as you discuss the criteria, you actually have to show where in the site, how in the site those criteria are actually manifest in tangible or intangible assets. So when we talk about criterion 3 in this particular case, we're talking about a sacred site, and we're talking about the religious values and the cultural traditions that are actually existing on the site. So we have to understand what the attributes of the site are, which carry this outstanding universal value. Next slide, please. Once we go through the criterion and we make the argument that the criterion are met, the second thing that we have to do is we have to ensure that there is integrity on the site. What do we mean by integrity? We mean, does the site actually tell the whole story? Does it convey in the totality those values that it is supposed to be conveying? And so integrity is really about wholeness. It's about completeness. And in fact, actually, then there will be a paragraph which explains why this particular property does have this integrity, why it does have this completeness, and why it does have this wholeness. And you can see just the bolded section where it talks about that this site ensures the sustainability of the ecosystem, of this mountain ecosystem as a whole. So for all sites, we have to make sure that it has this completeness, that it has this wholeness. Next slide, please. We also have to show for cultural sites, and this is only for cultural properties, that it also has authenticity. And the question of what is authenticity is, it answers the question, is it truthful? Does the site actually truthfully convey the values that we are trying to, that we are ascribing to the property? Now, this is not something that natural properties have to meet in terms of in terms of natural properties, but certainly in cultural properties, we have to be able to show that the elements, that the attributes of that site are truthful, that they are authentic. Next slide, please. And then finally, again, we have to show that there is adequate protection and adequate management for the property. And what does that mean? It means that there has to be adequate protection mechanisms in place, there have to be adequate legal frameworks, there have to be adequate management systems in place, there should be management plans, and not only that, but I would argue most importantly, there has to be a ongoing relationship at the site between the management authorities and the stakeholders, the people using the site, the people living around the site. So I think there's an important aspect in the management, not just to, not just to look at the site itself, but also the people around the site, the people using the site. And all of those things go into ensuring that there is an adequate protection and management. Next slide, please. The other thing within the protection and management that we have to look about is we also have to look at things like the buffer zone and whether that's adequately protected, and we also have to look at future management issues which we might be dealing with. So in a site, for example, that has a very fragile ecosystem, we have to be thinking about management not just today, but what happens once the site is inscribed on the World Heritage List and there's an additional amount of tourism that comes. So we have to think about management of the problems when you're inscribing the property, but you also have to think in the future about what some of the most important management issues will be coming in the site in the future. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, and I believe this is the last slide, all of these issues will go into something called the Statement of Outstanding Universal Value. This Statement of Outstanding Universal Value, when you're looking at nominations, new nominations, you should be looking at that Statement of Outstanding Universal Value, and you should be making sure that it accurately reflects what the committee's belief is in relation to whether the site actually has outstanding universal value or not. So this Statement of Outstanding Universal Value becomes a first important thing that you have to look at before you inscribe the site. But this Statement of Outstanding Universal Value also becomes of the utmost importance after the site is inscribed on the World Heritage List. When you are talking about state of conservation reports, when we're talking about item 7A and item 7B, you should also be looking at that Statement of Outstanding Universal Value, which has already been adopted for the property, and whatever decisions, whatever issues you're discussing in item 7A or 7B, you should be looking back at that Statement of Outstanding Universal Value, because those issues that you're discussing will be affecting in one way or another the issues that are within this statement of OUV. And what ultimately you're trying to do is you're trying to take decisions which will protect the outstanding universal value as you find it in the Statement of Outstanding Universal Value. So I would invite all of you, not just for new nominations, but also for state of conservation reports that you'll be listening to and you'll be debating. I would invite you to look back at the outstanding universal value statement as you're debating these sites, to make sure that that the issues that you're raising and your viewpoints on those sites are keeping within this concept of outstanding universal value as it's defined in the Statement of Outstanding Universal Value. So with that, I'll close this reminder on outstanding universal value, and I will now give the floor to nominations and to Iucn, I believe, is going to be first talking about nominations. So the floor goes to Iucn and to Gwinnell, please.
Merci Joe. Donc effectivement, je vais vous présenter les conditions d'inscription d'un bien sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. D'une certaine façon, je vais répéter autrement et peut-être d'un autre point de vue ce que Joe vient de vous présenter sur le concept de valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Diapo suivante, s'il vous plaît. Donc, les organisations consultatives qui réalisent une étude scientifique des propositions d'inscription évaluent dans quelle mesure les biens qui sont proposés pour inscription remplissent les conditions de valeur universelle exceptionnelle telles que définies par les orientations. Donc vous avez en tête le schéma que Joe a présenté avec les 3 piliers qui constituent la valeur universelle exceptionnelle, que sont les critères d'inscription, l'intégrité, l'authenticité, la protection et la gestion. On pourrait ajouter à ces piliers, les fondements de ces piliers seraient l'inventaire, les inventaires, l'analyse comparative et le cadre législatif. La Convention du patrimoine mondial est une convention de site, donc ce sont bien des biens qui sont inscrits sur la liste du patrimoine mondial, et ces biens expriment une valeur universelle exceptionnelle, et ce sont les attributs qui sont porteurs de cette valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Ces attributs, peut-être pour les définir de façon un peu plus précise, ce sont des éléments physiques ou des aspects tangibles ou intangibles ou des processus du bien qui manifestent la valeur universelle exceptionnelle du bien. Diapo suivante. L'inscription d'un bien sur la liste du patrimoine mondial est recommandée par les organisations consultatives lorsque les conditions suivantes sont remplies. Donc, je vais passer dans la liste de ces conditions et vous expliquer dans quelle mesure les organisations consultatives recommandent l'inscription. Donc, l'analyse comparative a été considérée comme satisfaisante dans la mesure où elle a pu démontrer la façon dont le bien se distingue par rapport à d'autres exemples similaires dans la même ère géoculturelle, et elle a permis d'appréhender l'importance du bien dans son contexte national et international. Les organisations consultatives s'appuient, en complément des informations qui sont comprises dans le dossier de proposition d'inscription, sur des recherches scientifiques, sur les études thématiques qui sont disponibles pour évaluer l'adéquation de cette analyse comparative. En ce qui concerne les critères en eux-mêmes, soit un ou même plusieurs critères ou l'ensemble des critères culturels et ou naturels doivent être justifiés. Les conditions d'intégrité, celles-ci sont démontrées si tous les éléments qui sont nécessaires à l'expression de la valeur universelle exceptionnelle proposée sont compris dans les délimitations du bien, et si celui-ci, le bien, est d'une taille suffisante pour représenter les éléments et processus qui expriment cette valeur, et si finalement le bien en lui-même n'a pas souffert d'impact négatif dû à un développement ou à l'abandon. Pour vous donner un exemple, un paysage agro-industriel devra inclure les éléments qui contribuent à dépeindre les principaux facteurs géographiques, technologiques et socio-historiques qui ont rendu possible son établissement et son développement. Pour les biens culturels uniquement, les conditions d'authenticité, celles-ci sont considérées comme étant remplies si les valeurs qui sont mises en avant sont exprimées de manière véridique et crédible à travers une variété d'attributs. Donc l'ICOMOS, dans ce cas-là, vérifie dans quelle mesure les sources d'information témoignent de façon véridique de la valeur du bien. Pour vous donner un exemple, pour un site archéologique, l'ICOMOS considérera la façon dont les vestiges matériels du bien, qui sont associés aux nombreuses informations qui proviennent des fouilles archéologiques, par exemple, conduites sur le site, apportent un témoignage crédible à l'appui de l'importance de la culture qui a bâti le bien. Diapo suivante. Donc, les conditions suivantes ont également été remplies pour justifier l'inscription. En ce qui concerne les délimitations, celles-ci sont satisfaisantes si elles incluent tous les éléments qui contribuent à la valeur universelle exceptionnelle du bien, si elles comprennent également les zones qui, à la lumière de recherches futures, permettraient d'accroître sa compréhension, et si elles ont été clairement délimitées. Ces délimitations, bien évidemment, peuvent coïncider avec des zones protégées, et les zones tampons doivent assurer un surcroît de protection au bien. La protection, elle, a été considérée comme étant adéquate si le bien est protégé de façon réglementaire au niveau national, régional, municipal et ou traditionnel, et de préférence au plus haut niveau possible. L'ensemble du bien et ses attributs doivent faire l'objet d'une protection, et les mesures de protection doivent permettre de protéger le bien des menaces qui peuvent peser sur celui-ci. Les mesures de conservation qui sont mises en place sont considérées satisfaisantes dans la mesure où elles permettent de maintenir les valeurs du bien ainsi que les conditions d'intégrité et d'authenticité. Et finalement, la gestion est considérée appropriée, Joe en a parlé également, si elle s'appuie sur une compréhension claire de ce qui constitue la valeur du bien et de ses attributs, si elle définit la façon dont cette valeur va être préservée pour les générations futures, si elle permet de gérer les changements de manière efficace et dans la mesure où elle s'appuie sur des moyens participatifs. Diapo suivante. Finalement, un bien peut échouer sur l'un ou l'autre de ces aspects. Il peut avoir une importance universelle, mais une protection et gestion qui ne sont pas satisfaisantes. À l'inverse, il peut être protégé et géré de façon adéquate, mais ne pas avoir démontré une importance universelle exceptionnelle. Donc, la non-réalisation de certaines de ces conditions, telles que je vous les ai présentées, doit conduire à proposer autre chose qu'une recommandation pour l'inscription. Ce sont bien l'ensemble de ces conditions, telles qu'elles sont définies par les orientations, qui doivent être réunies pour permettre l'inscription d'un bien sur la liste. Les organisations consultatives ont pour habitude d'ajouter des recommandations en général à la recommandation principale, et celles-ci sont des recommandations additionnelles qui ne sont pas conditionnelles par rapport à l'inscription d'un bien. Ce sont plutôt des recommandations qui sont perçues comme des orientations futures pour la gestion du bien. Diapo suivante. Finalement, les organisations consultatives agissent dans l'intérêt de la conservation des biens. Cela signifie que parfois, il est recommandé que plus de temps soit accordé pour permettre l'inscription sur la liste. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Gwenel. So now, having heard that first overview from Gwenel, and I'd like to give the floor now to Iucn to specifically talk about new nominations of natural and mixed World Heritage properties. So I give the floor to Peter.
Thank you very much, Joe, and thank you, Gwenel, for covering some of the ICOMOS aspects of the nomination process. I'd like to just use these few slides to make a few points around the Iucn evaluation process and the work that we do. I won't go through the process in enormous detail. We have this information well documented on Iucn's website. It's within Annex 6 of the operational guidelines, and it's also covered in the introductory text of the INF document, which has Iucn's main evaluations. So the WC 19-43com INF 8B2 really outlines our processes. Iucn, as the sister advisory body to ICOMOS on evaluations, follows quite similar methodologies in terms of completeness and rigorousness in our processes. We take very seriously our charge under paragraph 148 of the operational guidelines, which asks of us to evaluate in a very rigorous way to very high professional standards and to a high degree of consistency. And we focus strongly on the consistency of our evaluation processes with past committee decisions and also with past Iucn positions as well. Next slide, please. We work across these four principles which guide Iucn's evaluations. As I said, the highest standards of assessment based on independent expert analysis and field assessment, very much consistent with the operational guidelines. We work in partnership very strongly and increasingly in partnership with different organisations and at different levels. We promote World Heritage as flagships of conservation. I'll elaborate a little bit more on this. And we really seek to use Iucn's extensive networks, our networks through Iucn's members, but also specifically our commission members who number over 10,000 individual scientists in a number of fields around protected areas, around species conservation, around ecosystem management, social policy and economics issues, and a range of other topics which are absolutely a critical resource to us in undertaking evaluation work. And without the support of these enormous volunteer hours, we would not be able to do the work we do. It is very important for Iucn to respect the different roles that we play here at the committee. The role that we play as independent advisors, providing unfettered technical advice, the role of the centre in playing its facilitation role as secretariat, and of course the role of the committee in making decisions. And our job is really to provide the information that allows you as committee members to make the best informed decisions based on the files that are before us. And increasingly, we absolutely support the strengthened role of civil society in having a voice in the processes which go on here. Next slide, please. I do like to just stress the fact that for Iucn, World Heritage is a very important part of our work, actually outside of the statutory processes, the work we do as an advisory body. As I said, we look to position World Heritage as a flagship for conservation. We talk about the litmus test of conservation practice. We talk about these places as exemplars of good practice and places where we can affect change. It's really a critical investment that Iucn makes in World Heritage over and above the work that we do as a statutory part of the process. And that stems very much from the demands which Iucn hears from its own membership of the importance of World Heritage, the importance of this convention to really affecting the sort of conservation mission of Iucn. Next slide, please. This is an illustration of the Iucn evaluation process. I think it looks quite similar to the ICOMOS one. I always advise people to work from the bottom of this diagram to the top. I think a few points to make on this are that it is very much a multi-dimensional process. We look to inputs from a wide range of different sources. We are very much broadening the sources of information that we seek that advice from. So there are processes involving a very thorough examination of the nomination dossier. We seek to undertake a comparative analysis of the values which we are being presented with to understand whether we are meeting criteria. And we are fortunate, I think, in Iucn to have quite a solid series of thematic studies, gap analyses, these scientific frameworks which really give us the reference points to look at properties and their credentials. The work we do in that regard is partnered with the UN Environment's World Conservation Monitoring Centre, who undertake a global comparative analysis for us on sites which are nominated under the biodiversity criterion 9 and 10. We have partnerships in the geosciences area to give us that expertise on those types of properties. And we seek a wide range of additional research and peer reviews. We, again, access those very broad networks of Iucn and beyond to bring to the views of the World Heritage Panel in Iucn peer review of claims and credentials of sites. And the ultimate decision-making process rests with the Iucn World Heritage Panel. Next slide, please. The Iucn panel, some illustrations, some images here of the panel at work for Iucn, consists of 10 to 12 members. At the moment we have a slightly smaller panel reflecting the reduction in the number of nominations, which we will see happening from the next cycle. The composition of the panel is on our website, as are the terms of reference. The panel operates under a code of conduct. And we have strong governance arrangements around the panel in terms of its rotation, representation, who is on the panel. Important, I think, to stress that our panel operates with total independence within the Iucn system. The panel is not influenced in any way by Iucn's views and the recommendations of the panel faithfully transmitted to the committee. We have, as I said, been working to expand representation on the panel to ensure we have the sort of inputs that keep pace with changing demands and changing concepts that are coming forward to us in nominations, and we will continue to do that. Next slide, please. We operate also through a very broad network of field expertise all around the world. Our mission experts are drawn from many of those different networks. We seek always to have regional expertise on our missions. And I think the last thing I'd just like to close on is our support very much for the reform processes which are going on within the conversations of the committee here, within the ad hoc working group, the expert meetings which have been held. Iucn is very committed to those reform processes and a process of continual improvement and evolution in our working methods, and we look forward to working with you in the future further on those. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you again, Gwenaël, for explaining the evaluation process. I think it's just really important to underline, first of all, the rigor that both advisory bodies give to the work that they do, and also the amount of input coming from different sources, I think, is also something very important to underline. That it's not, sometimes there's a mistaken impression that a mission expert goes out to a site and they are coming back and they're making a decision that ICOMOS adopts or that Iucn adopts. But the fact of the matter is that there's a tremendous amount of input coming from a lot of different places, feeding into the panels of the two advisory bodies, which eventually lead to those decisions. So it's not one person's impression. It's a corporate decision of the two organizations ultimately, and I think they've done a good job of trying to explain that. So thank you again for those presentations. Now I'll turn more to the procedural aspects, and that takes us back to the World Heritage Center and my good friend Alessandro Balsamo, who will talk about the documentation, the introduction to the 2019 nominations and documentation, and your role as the World Heritage Committee, and specifically, I believe you'll look a little bit at the referral-deferral issue. Yes, so I will give the floor to Alessandro.
Thank you very much, Joe. So, as Joe just said, following the more specific description of the nomination process provided under cultural criteria that's presented by ICOMOS and under natural criteria as presented by Iucn, I would like to provide you with some more general considerations about the process and a few statistics over the nomination that will be examined by this session of the committee. Next slide, please. So you see there are 35 nominations currently on the agenda of this committee, 5 of which are natural, 2 mixed, and 28 cultural. And actually 28 out of these 35 nominations are new nominations. 1 is a significant boundary modification, and 6 of these nominations are previously deferred or referred nominations. 8 nominations were withdrawn and 2 were postponed. And we also have, to conclude item 8B on nominations, 13 minor boundary modification to deal with. Next slide, please. In this slide, we can see the same statistics, but presented under the different categories. So we see, interestingly, that for the time being, given the recommendation of the advisory bodies, we have 23 proposed inscriptions, 4 referrals, 6 deferrals, 1 approved extension, 1 non-inscription, and as we said, 8 withdrawn. Next slide, please. In this table, which quite interestingly reproduce the trend of the regional breakdown of properties inscribed on the World Heritage List, you can see that out of the 23 properties that are recommended for inscription, basically half are from the Europe and North America region, and then 8 from the Asia-Pacific region. And we have 2 from the Arab region, 1 from the Africa region, and 1 from the Latin American region. Next slide, please. As was already said by the director of the World Heritage Center, Matilde, previously, this is really important, but we will examine nomination this year, starting with natural, so the 5 nominations from natural sites, then the 2 mixed, and then the rest of the 28 cultural. And within each of this category will be followed the regional order, as you see: Africa, Arab states, Asia Pacific, Europe, North America, and Latin America. And at the end, there will be the 13 minor boundary modification of boundaries. Next slide. This is to show where you can find the documentation on the website of the World Heritage Center. I hope you are familiar with this, but it's just a reminder. There's this part that is dedicated to the 43rd session of the World Heritage Committee on our website, as you can see in the red circle. Next slide. And when you click on that, you will get to this page where actually you can access, as the arrow indicates, the nominations that are going to be examined by this committee meeting. Next slide, please. And this page is actually updated regularly. So, for instance, it was again updated yesterday with the latest withdrawal. Next slide. And as you can see, you can really access all the documentation relating to each of the nomination, and executive summary of the nominations, nomination text as a whole, annexes, maps, and everything that goes with a nomination is available. Next slide, please. As you can see, these are the nomination in PDF files. Next slide. But beside nominations, you should also, of course, look at the evaluations that are also presented, as you know, under the working documents and information documents that are presented for this session. And you have 2 volumes from ICOMOS and 2 volumes from Iucn for this session, for the evaluation of the nominations we are going to examine. Next slide, please. And now we will very quickly talk about the role of the committee concerning specifically nominations. Next slide, please. In this case, we want to recall paragraph 23 of the operational guidelines, which is really important because it says that the decisions of the committee are based on objective and scientific considerations, and any appraisal made on its behalf must be thoroughly and responsibly carried out. And the committee recognizes that such decisions depend upon carefully prepared documentation, thorough and consistent procedures, evaluation by qualified experts, and, if necessary, the use of experts' referees. Next slide, please. So the main functions of the committee are in cooperation with state parties to identify, on the basis of tentative lists and nominations submitted by state parties, cultural and natural properties of outstanding universal value, which are to be protected under the Convention, and to inscribe those properties on the World Heritage List. Next slide, please. So, in paragraph 153 of the operational guidelines, actually the committee, under this paragraph, the committee can take 4 types of decision regarding nomination, which is to inscribe the property, refer the nomination back to the state party, defer the examination of the nomination, or not to inscribe. Next slide. And we would like to briefly remind what are the main differences, for instance, between a referral and deferral, because this is a very important questions that the committee should be aware of while taking a decision, because there are substantial differences. But we have summarized here in a couple of paragraphs this distinction. And the referral, in the case of the referral, there is need for a limited amount of minor supplementary additional information normally. And a nomination which is referred may be resubmitted within 3 years, starting with the following committee session. So no additional mission is needed, no visit to the site. Normally there's a new nomination and no new boundaries and not different criteria, because these are substantial changes that should be evaluated, carefully evaluated, and referral does not allow because this kind of evaluation, because there's no time and because there is no site visit. Instead of the deferral, where a more in-depth assessment or study or substantial revision is needed, along, of course, with a new evaluation mission, and the deferral is requiring the preparation of a new nomination, new text of the nomination. So these are two different mechanisms that should be seen as constructive options that can assist state parties to further develop nomination that then, in the end, may lead to successful inscription. And we have to seeing that way in a sort of if the deferral, for instance, is used properly, it can be taken almost as an upstream support to the state party. We have seen very successful cases in which the deferral brought much more positive things to the site itself than it would have gone with the first attempt if the nomination was pushed through an inscription. Next slide, please. So this is just to remind you that sometimes, and often actually, the committee has the tendency to think of giving a nice gift to the state party, for instance, changing a recommendation from deferral to referral. But you have to be very careful, because it's not just about changing the first verb of the decision, but we have to look at all the recommendation that goes with that, and we have to take into account what we just said in the matter of the fact that there is no visit to the site, there is no chance to change criteria, there is no chance to change boundaries within a referral. And so if the state party is given a referral without the possibility of doing this thing, it's basically as is ends are tied. Next slide, please. And one thing that also is very important to recall is that the outstanding universal value is determined only at the time of inscription of a property. This is a combined effect of Articles 11.2 and 13.8 of the Convention. Next slide, please. And it's also relating to this, the fact that making a determination of outstanding universal value within the referral or deferral decision is not in the mandate of the committee, and is it actually inconsistent with the Convention and its operational guidelines, because this determination, as we said, can only be seen and it can only happen at the moment of inscription. Next slide. And I think this is all, and now I turn back to Joe.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, the screen says question and answer, so I guess before we go to state conservation, we will do questions and answers. All right, so you've heard, thank you, actually all of you, and I want to turn the floor back over to the committee members now. If you have any specific questions or issues that you would like to ask either to the advisory bodies or to the World Heritage Center in relation to the nomination the information on nominations that you've heard just now. So the floor is to you all if you have questions or need clarifications. I'm not seeing any. I'm not seeing any. Okay. So in that case, I'd thank all of you very much. And we can move on to the next item on our agenda, which is state of conservation. Oh, sorry. Richard, you're there. Sorry. Okay. So thank you all very much. We now move to the next item, which is state of conservation, and we will start with an introduction to the process for 2019 and related documentation, and that will be given by Richard Veillon from the World Heritage Center, who is to my left. Richard.
Merci beaucoup, Joe. Donc après avoir été inscrit sur la liste du patrimoine mondial, il arrive que certains biens fassent l'objet d'un suivi réactif et intègrent le processus de suivi réactif donc, de la Convention du patrimoine mondial. Diapo suivante. Voilà, les articles 4 et 6, extrêmement importants, vous rappellent que la conservation est vraiment au cœur de la Convention du patrimoine mondial. Toujours gardez bien ça en tête, la conservation est au cœur de la Convention. C'est sa raison d'être. Diapo suivante. Donc, dans le cadre des rapports SOC 2019, vous aurez à examiner 166 biens inscrits sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Les 54 biens qui sont inscrits sur la liste en péril et 112 autres biens qui sont inscrits sur la liste du patrimoine mondial, mais pas sur la liste en péril. Parmi ces 166 biens, 50 sont des biens naturels, 5 mixtes et 111 sont des biens culturels. Diapo suivante. Sur cette diapo, vous pouvez voir la répartition géographique des rapports SOC qui sont pour examen en 2019. Je ne vais pas rentrer dans trop de détails, mais les colonnes bleues donnent le ratio des biens inscrits sur la liste du patrimoine mondial par région. En vert, le ratio sur la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril. Et en gris, le ratio des biens qui sont sujets au suivi réactif. La diapo suivante vous montre ces ratios selon les catégories de biens. Donc les sites naturels sur la gauche, mixtes au centre et les biens culturels sur la droite. Vous pouvez retrouver toutes ces statistiques et plus en détail encore dans l'introduction du document 7 qui vous est soumis cette année. Diapo suivante. Un élément très important également à prendre en compte dans le processus d'état de conservation, ce sont les rapports soumis par les États parties eux-mêmes. Et en 2019, nous sommes ravis d'avoir reçu 99% de tous les rapports SOC qui étaient demandés par le comité aux États parties. Mais, parce qu'il y a toujours un petit mais quelque part, beaucoup nous sont parvenus extrêmement tardivement, empêchant d'avoir un dialogue constructif avec les États parties, les organisations consultatives et le secrétariat. Nous avons fait pour le mieux, mais je vous encourage toujours à soumettre les rapports d'état de conservation aux dates butoirs demandées par le comité. Diapo suivante. Donc, de quels documents aurez-vous besoin ou avez-vous eu besoin pour parfaitement apprécier l'état de conservation des biens qui vous sont proposés pour examen cette année? Diapo suivante. Donc, vous devez prendre en compte les rapports, bien sûr, des États parties. Cette année, plus de 80% d'entre eux sont mis en ligne en accès public. Et pour les 20% restants, vous disposez d'un résumé exécutif d'une page. Vous devez prendre en compte également les rapports de mission, qui sont également disponibles en accès public, les décisions antérieures du comité sur ces mêmes biens, et bien évidemment, prendre en compte les rapports SOC qui vous ont proposés par le secrétariat et les organisations consultatives dans les documents 7A pour les sites en péril et 7B pour les autres biens. Il vous faudra également considérer les documents INF7REV qui vous présentent la liste des biens qui sont proposés pour discussion cette année. Nous allons émettre dans les prochaines heures un document INF7REV2, une liste mise à jour. Sur la diapo suivante, Vous avez un rappel en haut des écrans, donc de l'adresse Internet à laquelle vous pouvez accéder à tous ces documents. En cliquant sur l'onglet « Documents », vous avez accès à différents onglets avec les rapports SOC des États parties, les rapports de mission également, et les documents de travail. Diapo suivante. Alors, quel est le rôle quel est votre rôle, le rôle du comité dans le cadre du processus de suivi réactif? Diapo suivante. Donc, sur la base des informations scientifiques et techniques qui vous sont fournies dans les rapports d'état de conservation par les organisations consultatives et le secrétariat, vous pourrez prendre un certain nombre de décisions, comme par exemple aucune action requise si vous le jugez nécessaire ou si les mesures nécessaires ont été prises par l'État partie, ou au contraire, vous pourrez décider de la mise en place de mesures spécifiques pour améliorer l'état de conservation du bien. Vous pourrez également demander un rapport à l'État partie dans 1 an, dans 2 ans, un calendrier qui vous sied. Ou bien vous pourrez décider qu'une mission de suivi réactif est nécessaire sur le bien pour apprécier plus avant son état de conservation. Et bien d'autres mesures encore. Et dans des cas plus spécifiques, sur la diapo suivante, vous pourrez considérer que si la valeur universelle exceptionnelle du bien est sérieusement menacée, vous pourrez donc décider d'inscrire ce bien sur la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril. Ou à l'opposé, si vous considérez que l'état de conservation du bien s'est amélioré d'une manière telle que sa valeur universelle exceptionnelle n'est plus menacée, vous pourrez proposer de retirer ce bien de la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril. En dernier recours, si la valeur universelle exceptionnelle a été irrémédiablement détériorée et que le bien a perdu la valeur pour laquelle il avait été inscrit sur la liste du patrimoine mondial, vous pourrez alors décider de retirer ce bien de la liste du patrimoine mondial. Joe, la Iucn va présenter à présent la liste en péril.
Okay, I'll turn the floor over to Iucn to talk specifically about the danger list.
Thanks, Joe, and good afternoon, everybody. So we would like just to present some more details regarding the danger listing process because of the importance of this process for the convention, and we would just like to highlight some of the details. So if we go to the next slide, maybe. No signal. Very good. I guess the idea behind this section is to highlight again to the members of the committee the importance of the process of danger listing and why it exists and why it has been created. And the idea is really to have this as a call for action, to have a process that can help the states parties when the sites are facing threats and are facing danger. So Richard has already presented the procedural aspects of the process. Here we go. And I would just like to... oh, okay, I'm seeing the slides in front of me. Okay, everything is good. So here we're just going to present some more technical aspects of the process. So the provisions for inscription of a site on the list in danger are provided in the operational guidelines, both in general and specifically for cultural and natural properties, in paragraphs 178 to 180, really describing the types of threats that the sites can be facing and what are the provisions for inscription of a site on the danger list. And then if the committee decides to inscribe a site on the danger list, this whole process actually comes with a lot of tools that can then assist the site party along this process. So if we go to the next slide, here are the tools that accompany the process and are designed to help the states party. So these are a set of corrective measures and the time frame for their implementation. And on the next slide, we also have the desired state of conservation for removal of the property from the list in danger. So these are normally designed or developed in a consultative manner by the state party, but in consultation with the World Heritage Center and the advisory bodies. Sometimes this is done in the framework of a mission where the experts on the ground can actually assist the state party in the development of this framework. And it's really designed to be a roadmap for the state party to follow and eventually help the site address those issues that it's facing. So it's really a very useful tool that can guide the whole process and result in the site being then eventually removed from the list in danger. If we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is just going into a little bit more detail about the desired state of conservation, because this is still a relatively new thing that was developed not so many years ago. And I'll just continue talking. So it has a very specific framework. So it has a set of indicators and a time frame for each of them to be implemented. And they all are linked back to the outstanding universal value of the property. So it's really the core of the process to develop indicators that can then be measured after several years, let's say, and can then show whether the property is not facing danger anymore and therefore can be removed from the list of World Heritage in danger. And again, just to highlight that we as advisory bodies and the center consider that this can and should be perceived as a positive process that is there to help us all actually preserve the outstanding universal value of the sites. And we're glad to see that there are a lot of examples where, well, maybe not a lot, some examples where this has been used and where the states parties themselves even proactively have sought inscription of their sites on the list in danger because they really saw this as this tool to as call for action. So I will pass back to Richard to make an announcement about a slightly more interesting item on our agenda, but I don't know what's with the technical details of that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elena. But I think more than long speeches, we have actually a very nice video that was provided by the State Party of Colombia on the benefits of the inscription of a property on the list in danger. And we're going to bring it extremely shortly on the screen for your enjoyment. Thank you.
Let me just make the point that one of the reasons that we have this orientation session in the committee room prior to the committee is so that we can test all the equipment out. So this is actually one of the things that you're seeing right now is we're going to hopefully get all the bugs out of the system during the orientation session. And here's the video.
Creado en 1973, el Parque Nacional Natural Los Catíos tiene una superficie total de 72.000 hectáreas y está ubicado en el noroccidente de Colombia, en la región del Darién y Urabá, en los departamentos de Chocó y Antioquia. Limita en el occidente con Panamá, específicamente con el Parque Nacional del Darién, con el que comparte el título de Patrimonio Mundial Natural y Reserva de la Biosfera. Por esto, es también un paso importante para millones de especies y representa un legado cultural invaluable. El parque tiene conexión directa de un complejo de ciénagas y humedales con selva muy húmeda tropical. Tiene ríos muy importantes como el Atrato, Cacarica y Pelle, y un alto grado de endemismo y biodiversidad. Por ejemplo, a pesar de representar una pequeña área del territorio colombiano, tiene cerca del 30% de las aves registradas para el país.
Para las comunidades étnicas, indígenas y afrodescendientes, el Parque Los Catíos tiene un significado muy interesante, no solo porque de allí derivan unos y otros su supervivencia, sino porque tiene una importancia de tipo cultural y espiritual. Para ellos, el Parque Los Catíos tiene muchos sitios sagrados que le aportan a su riqueza espiritual.
Por estos motivos que hacen del área protegida un sitio excepcional en cuanto a procesos ecológicos y biológicos, fue declarada Sitio de Patrimonio Natural Mundial por la UNESCO en 1994. Asimismo, el parque tiene una rica variedad de ecosistemas, incluyendo bosques tropicales y pantanosos, colinas bajas y planicies aluviales, que constituyen hábitats naturales para la conservación in situ de la diversidad biológica. Por su ubicación estratégica y aislada, el sitio es refugio para una gran cantidad de especies, 450 de aves, más de 550 de vertebrados y 669 de plantas.
Gracias a todo ese trabajo que realizan los funcionarios del parque, nos ayudan a nosotros y al tema de la conservación de los recursos hidrobiológicos y los recursos pesqueros que se encuentran al interior del parque.
En el pasado, el impacto de la deforestación, la degradación de ecosistemas estratégicos como los humedales, la reconversión de los suelos para usos como agricultura dentro y fuera del parque, el conflicto social con comunidades reasentadas en él y la imposibilidad del Estado de ejercer de manera segura la autoridad ambiental en el territorio, sumado a las amenazas por posibles megaproyectos atravesando el área, afectaron la integridad del área protegida. Es así como el gobierno de Colombia, luego de consultas con el Centro de Patrimonio Mundial y la Unión Internacional para la Conservación de la Naturaleza, en su rol de órgano asesor para sitios naturales, solicitó en el año 2009 al Comité de Patrimonio Mundial la inclusión del área dentro de la lista de sitios de patrimonio mundial en peligro. Se enfatizó la necesidad de movilizar apoyos a nivel local, regional, nacional e internacional para resolver la situación que ponía en riesgo el valor universal excepcional del sitio Patrimonio Mundial. Durante los siguientes años, Parques Nacionales Naturales de Colombia desarrolló un esquema de medidas correctivas, el cual se denominó Plan de Choque con las siguientes acciones estratégicas. Mejorar la actividad de control y vigilancia, mejorando la infraestructura, la asignación de personal y la articulación con la fuerza pública. Generar acuerdos de uso y manejo de recursos naturales con las comunidades afrodescendientes que utilizan los recursos naturales. Generar un proceso de reconocimiento a las comunidades indígenas que se encuentran al interior y en la zona de influencia del área. Hacer una gestión interinstitucional con las alcaldías, las corporaciones regionales y las entidades del sector pesquero para articular acciones en la defensa y protección del parque. Hacer una gestión para incidir en que los proyectos de infraestructura no afectaran el área protegida.
Esta estrategia también involucró definitivamente a la comunidad local, a las autoridades locales, para poder superar los problemas del parque. Ellos entendieron también que estando en la lista de patrimonio en peligro debían participar activamente en las estrategias que llevaran a superar los problemas para lograr que el comité de la UNESCO decidiera sacarlo de la lista de patrimonio en peligro.
Este proceso ha sido muy interesante porque ha sido una estrategia desde la unidad de parques nacionales en donde se ha integrado mucho con las comunidades, no solamente mirando el parque como un objeto intocable e impenetrable pues hacia las áreas como tal, sino que han venido haciendo durante mucho tiempo, y nosotros hemos sido acompañantes en algunas actividades, se ha venido haciendo un trabajo muy interesante con las comunidades con influencia directa en el parque, las que están en la zona de amortiguamiento, algunas que viven al interior del parque, y eso ha permitido una compenetración muy importante, una articulación fuerte entre las comunidades y la institucionalidad.
La comunidad entre todos, el territorio colectivo de los pueblos negros, estuvimos una relación conjunta con el Parque Nacional, tanto los pueblos indígenas que están más cercanos del parque, hicimos una actividad con la comunidad, llevando el proceso como de concientizar a las personas de la misma comunidad más cercana o alrededor del parque, como el pueblo indígena, Cunadule, que está más cercana, y el territorio colectivo.
Este plan fue posteriormente revisado y ajustado en el marco de la misión de evaluación de la Iucn realizada en el año 2011 y se establecieron actividades adicionales, así como indicadores específicos para responder ante las amenazas reportadas. Con base en este nuevo plan de actividades, se estableció el estado deseado de conservación, que es el mapa de ruta formalmente considerado por la UNESCO para demostrar el progreso en alcanzar las metas. Una o varias estrategias fueron identificadas para mitigar cada una de estas amenazas. Se articularon alianzas, procesos, recursos y personal de distintas autoridades y organizaciones con miras a superar el estado crítico y alcanzar nuevamente el estatus de protección deseado. Como parte de este proceso, se elaboró también la Declaración Retrospectiva de Valor Universal Excepcional, la cual rescata los principales valores, integridad, manejo y perspectivas a largo plazo acerca del sitio. Una suerte de carta de presentación en la que se resaltan las cualidades por las que es considerado patrimonio de la humanidad. Tras el arduo trabajo de recuperación, siguiendo las recomendaciones del comité y como paso definitivo para alcanzar la meta de retirar al parque de la lista en peligro, se invitó a una misión de evaluación reactiva por parte de la Iucn a comienzos del año 2015. De acuerdo a las observaciones y hallazgos del experto de la misión, se recomendó la salida del parque de la categoría en peligro, considerando que las intervenciones en el área protegida habían dado frutos en materia de conservación.
Para Colombia, la inclusión del Parque Nacional en la lista de patrimonio en peligro es una oportunidad. No lo hemos tomado nunca como un castigo. Hemos analizado los postulados de la Convención y nos damos cuenta de que es la oportunidad para diseñar una estrategia que nos lleve a superar los problemas del parque.
En este sentido, en el marco de la 39ª sesión del Comité de Patrimonio Mundial de la UNESCO, celebrado en junio de 2015, se adoptó la decisión de retirar el Parque Nacional Natural Los Catíos de la lista de patrimonio en peligro.
Consideramos que se han hecho unos esfuerzos interdisciplinarios. Inicialmente las mismas personas del parque le han puesto todo el interés para que realmente en el parque vuelva a ser lo que realmente debe de ser. Todo esto también ha surtido un efecto muy importante porque también ha permitido de que regrese la seguridad al parque.
La decisión reconoció los esfuerzos del Estado colombiano para lograr el estado deseado de conservación, superando la adversidad y cohesionando socialmente el territorio, lo cual sin duda constituye un avance fundamental en el manejo efectivo y la gobernanza equitativa del área protegida.
Así se hizo y creo que con éxito pudimos superar la mayoría de los problemas más graves que tenía el Parque Nacional. Nuestro compromiso ahora es seguirlo manejando de manera efectiva con la autoridad regional y local y parques nacionales cuidando nuestro Parque Nacional Patrimonio de la Humanidad.
Para que el parque esté en donde está, necesitamos que el gobierno lo siga apoyando, así como lo está haciendo ahora o con más fuerza, para que así también el parque apoye a nuestra comunidad para salir adelante, porque queremos que el parque fortalezca también los proyectos que ha dado o que se den otros proyectos para la comunidad de Tumaradó y para otras también.
Hay otro aspecto que es muy importante, es el de control y vigilancia. Yo creo que cada vez todos aquellos que están metidos en el tráfico se las van ingeniando, entonces no podemos creer que ya tenemos solucionado el problema por nuestro aplicativo y digamos que por la articulación que tenemos con Chocó y Corpourabá. Tenemos que ser todavía más sagaces y estar revisando que efectivamente lo que está haciendo documental corresponda a la realidad, y eso significa más seguimiento en campo.
Todo lo anterior no habría sido ni será posible sin el trabajo del equipo de Parques Nacionales Naturales de Colombia, que desde las distintas competencias y capacidades ha dispuesto de los recursos requeridos para alcanzar estos logros, preservar la salud de los ecosistemas y los beneficios para la comunidad de los departamentos de Antioquia y Chocó, cruciales en todo el proceso para avanzar el plan de choque y con quienes será fundamental trabajar frente a los mencionados retos en beneficio de los colombianos y a disposición de toda la humanidad.
So thank you very much. We wanted to end with this video because we want to make it clear that these are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve within the World Heritage Convention. We're trying to use the World Heritage Convention for the protection of sites and to ensure that they can be passed on to future generations. And this is a particularly good example also because it's an effort that had a very strong community involvement. And I think that's actually something also that over the years of the convention, that aspect has gotten stronger, and we're actually moving more toward a sustainable development, let's say, approach. And I think this video illustrates that. So I think that's going to conclude the section on state of conservation. And I will once again, one last time, ask if there are any questions or answers, specifically on the state of conservation issues, but also if there are any questions on the nominations or other procedures that you've heard in the orientation session today. Okay, I don't see any, so I assume that means that we were very clear in our presentations, and I'm happy for that. I'm also hoping that we have the technical difficulties ironed out now, so that when we actually start with the committee meeting tomorrow morning, we can move ahead without those sorts of problems. Actually, one last thing I would like to ask you is this example that you saw from Colombia, I think, is a very good one, and I would ask over the course of the next week if you have other good examples, either related to danger listing or just in general state of conservation, or even some good examples of nomination processes where you yourselves have gone through, your state party has gone through a very good process of developing a nomination dossier. It would be good for us to be able to collect a couple of those case studies so that we can use them in future orientation sessions. So I will be here for the rest of the week at the Quorum desk, which I believe is over on that side of the room. And I'd be happy to talk to you if you have any other case studies for the future. I see a question coming from Uganda. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Iucn. There are likely to be situations where a property is being nominated to the World Heritage List, but at the same time also being listed on a property in danger. And the concerned state party may disagree with the position, for instance, of placing it on the list in danger. Will you permit some debate on such a situation? Thank you.
Well, I'll give the floor over to Mr. Balsamo to answer the question, but before I do that, I would say that the debate is, the possibility for debate amongst committee members is always present. So certainly there will be a possibility to discuss those issues. But I will turn the floor over to Alessandro for a more specific answer.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have actually two nominations that will be examined that are proposed for inscription and at the same time for inscription on the list of World Heritage in Danger this year. One is the extension, transboundary extension from Albania, and the other one, the inscription of Babylon from Iraq. And in both cases, of course, while discussing the proposed inscription, there will be a debate on the potential inscription on the list in danger, and the committee will deal with these two issues and will examine these two issues. With the additional peculiarity in the case of the extension from Albania, that at the same time there is a status of conservation concerning the part already inscribed of the property in North Macedonia. So the point will be open under the state of conservation, kept open, and then when we will deal with the significant boundary modification that will present the significant extension of proposed extension of the site to the Albanian side, we will also then see at the same time the question of the proposed list in danger for the whole site, because of course logically you cannot put only half of a site in danger and the rest not. But to answer plainly to your question, all debates are open under nomination, because we received a couple of these questions already before coming to the session, and this must be clear. All the nominations that are under examination are open to debate.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, so seeing none, I would like to thank, first of all, I'd like to thank our speakers, most of them who are still here, for having come here to give this orientation session. I would like to thank you, the committee members, for having attended. And as I said, I'll be here throughout the rest of the week. If anyone has any comments or questions that they would like to follow up on at a later moment, we would certainly be happy to do that. And at this point in time, I would like to close the orientation session and remind everyone that it's 6 p.m. now. Remind everyone that the opening ceremony starts at 8 o'clock, but they're asking that you be at the venue at 7:30, if I'm remembering correctly what was told. So with that, we will see everyone at 7:30 next door for the opening ceremony, which will then begin at 8 o'clock. So thank you all very much.